The New York Mets bats fell silent on Wednesday night as they were shut out for just the second time this season, blowing a golden opportunity to sweep a bad Pirates team.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so as well over at justbaseball.com. Now, the Mets had a great opportunity to sweep the Pirates on Wednesday night, but everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The Mets lineup just couldn't get anything going, and they had their opportunities, which is so frustrating. They loaded the bases twice in this game, but came up empty each time. And the first time they loaded the bases was in the first inning. You had Mark Vientos get a hit with one out. Pete Alonso drew a walk. Then after Brandon Nimmo flew out, Starling Marte drew a walk to load the bases for Luis Torrens, but Torrens struck out. So that was a big blown opportunity. In the second inning, Jose Azocar gets on base in front of Francisco Lindor. He then gets picked off. So that was a situation where the Mets ran into an out. Then in the third inning, Lindor gets a leadoff walk, chance to start a rally. Vientos hits into a double play ball. It was just every time the Mets started to get something going, a door slams in their face and just can't get the job done. The most frustrating moment came in the bottom of the fourth inning. Mets are trailing 2-0 at that point. Nimmo and Torrens each got hits in the inning. Luis Angel Acuna drew a 2-out walk to load the bases, and they go to the bullpen. So the Pirates pull Bailey Falter 3 2/3 into his start, 3 2/3 innings pitched into his start. There's 2 outs in the fourth inning. You have the bases loaded. They bring in a right-hander to face Jose Azocar. Azocar being in the lineup for Juan Soto, who the Mets chose to give a day off. My thought on that was that Carlos Mendoza was trying to give Juan Soto 48 hours to clear his head in front of a series that all eyes are going to be on him over the weekend when the Mets go into the Bronx to face the Yankees. So instead of Soto in the lineup, it's Azocar, but at the same time, righty was coming into the game. Azocar was in there to face Bailey Falter, the lefty. You have Brett Beatty on the bench who's red hot. Now, if you had pinch hit Brett Beatty, you would have had to do some maneuvering with your infield. You probably had to move Acuna into the outfield. Maybe the Mets didn't want to do that. Okay, well, guess what? Jeff McNeil's on your bench too. So you had two left-handed options who are going to give you a better chance in that at-bat to get a hit than Jose Azocar. And I don't understand why Carlos Mendoza feels deferential to the last man on his bench at Jose Azocar. Let's be honest, Jose Azocar is lucky to be cashing big league checks right now. He is. If Alex Canario had more roster flexibility, it would be Canario in this spot instead of Azocar. We watched Canario throughout this series. Guess what? Canario, who's been getting regular playing time, has done nothing. So my point in bringing up Canario to Azocar is just that there is not a lot of top-end potential for what you might get from Jose Azocar. If the Mets are in a position that where Azocar is getting consistent playing time, a lot has gone wrong. So honestly, why even start him in the first place? To me, it should basically be a dead spot in the roster. Jose Azocar gets in there for defense and running. But to give him a start, I don't like anyway. I understand why Juan Soto was given a day. I get that. That's fine. But no harm in getting Jeff McNeil an extra start and putting him out there in right field. You're going to get better at bats against a lefty with Jeff McNeil up than you are with Jose Azocar. I still believe that to be the case. And even if you still want to stay left, right, left, right, left, right, it's a bases loaded opportunity. And you have good hitters on your bench that you can plug in to go left on right when they bring in the righty. So to me, that was just a brutal decision, especially because later in the game, what did you do? Seventh inning with nobody on base, 2 outs. You did pinch hit Jeff McNeil for Jose Azocar. and Jeff McNeil got a hit. So if that hit comes in the fourth inning, all of a sudden, maybe it's a tie baseball game. Maybe things end up different. Maybe there's an extended rally because guess what? The lineup would have turned over. Now Lindor gets a chance with runners on base. I just felt like the Mets had that opportunity punted when they didn't need to. And so that was the one moment in this game that really frustrated me. But again, the Mets just did not take advantage of their other opportunities. You had Pete Alonso trying to stretch a single into a double, gets thrown out. Altogether, the Mets did get some traffic on the bases, 5 walks, 6 hits, but to go 0 for 4 runners in scoring position, they strand 8 runners. It was just a rough game for them offensively. It's, again, the only second time. It is only the second time this year that they have been shut out. To only have been shut out twice when you're now, how many games into the season? 44 games into the year. It's a pretty, good testament to how good this offense has been overall. And I think it's kind of been underrated at this point, the way the Mets offense has performed, because the pitching has really carried the team. And so I think at times, especially when they're inconsistent with runners in scoring position, you might think, oh, well, this lineup's not that good. And granted, if you look at their batting average with runners in scoring position, it is in the bottom third of the league. Their OPS is middle of the pack, but their batting average in those spots is not great. At the same time, their OPS as a team on the season still top 5 in baseball. Their run scores in the top 10 over the past month. They're third best in OPS. Their top 5 are just outside of the top 5 in runs scored. So I think this offense is completely fine. I'm not going to take any big conclusions from this game other than the fact that I do not like any time when Jose Azocar gets in at bat, when you just have so many better players on this roster, particularly if it's a bases loaded spot. That is a very frustrating moment for me when they have an opportunity. They don't really put their best foot forward in that opportunity. But regardless, the Mets never score in this game, and Clay Holmes gives up a couple of home runs. And so it's a game that maybe the Mets were just never destined to win anyway. I will also acknowledge, though, that the home run that Clay Holmes gave up early was absolutely absurd because, for one, they're having Clay Holmes pitch in a torrential downpour. I mean, it was raining as hard as you'll ever see it rain where they're still playing through it. And I get it. The Mets had to play through some scattered showers to get this game in. And the last thing you want is to have a game postponed when it's a team that you don't see as often as the Mets aren't typically going to face off against the Pirates. So I understand that they wanted to make sure they got the game in. And so they were going to play through some rain throughout the night. But that was a moment in the game where the Mets or the umpires, could have stopped play for a little bit, 15 minutes, got everybody off the field, try to cover up, whatever it is, just not have a guy pitching in a torrential downpour. But also the frustrating part about that 2-run homer he gave up in the second inning is he was ahead in the count 0-2, and the third and the fourth pitch were both in the zone. And they weren't even close pitches. They weren't pitches that were just barely on the edges. If you look at the box, I mean, these are pitches that, for one, got a lot of plate, breaking balls up in the zone, and they clearly were in the zone. And they were both called balls, and that extends the count. Actually leads to Holmes pitching into some more rain because it just got worse and worse throughout that at bat. He misses badly on the fifth pitch, so he goes from 0-2 to 3-2. 6 pitches fouled off, and then he gives up the homer. So I really feel like that was a home run that never should have been allowed. He does end up giving up a home run in the 5th inning, another 2-run shot. So it's sort of a moot point. But I just feel like there was just a couple things this game that were just really frustrating, and it leads to a loss. I'll also say, if you want to put the blame on me, you can, because here I was over the past week touting a stat that I thought was pretty impressive that hadn't been talked about much. And that's the fact that since the opening series of the season, when both Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning took losses, the Mets were 14-0 when those two guys took the mound. So sure enough, first opportunity for that record to be tested, Clay Holmes ends up picking up a loss. I thought Holmes overall still pitched pretty well. I was impressed with him, starting on regular rest for the first time, still giving the Mets 6 innings. He pitched through constant traffic, gave up 7 hits, 1 walk, the 4 runs off of 2 2-run homers. I thought to get through and mitigate some damage at times and find his way to 18 outs for a Mets team that desperately needed to give that bullpen a rest. I thought he did a job well done as a starting pitcher that's helping you win the war of a season, right? Helping you have your best possible rested bullpen for a big series against the Yankees. If Clay Holmes goes out of that game in the fourth inning, who knows what your bullpen's looking like? You might have to make a roster move. Instead, he's able to stick it out, get through six. Genesis Cabrera gives you 6 outs. So that was big. And then Daniel Nunez puts up another 0. 1, 2, 3, ninth inning. You probably say that was the best he looked this year. I still think he's not completely crisp and looking like the Daniel Nunez of the past. There's still some bad misses mixed in there, but he is pounding the strike zone a little bit more. It is better than it was. And so we'll see if Nunez can continue to build off of another quality outing. Overall, rough loss for the Mets, but now they just got to flush it and focus on more important series that lies ahead. The Yankees coming up, the Red Sox after that, a tough stretch for your Mets. What I want to talk about in the next segment is some things we learned from David Stearns today, meeting with the media, and which roster moves are on the table in the coming weeks and months for the Mets. How will this team change as the calendar gets deeper into May and eventually turns to June and July? Where will this roster get adjusted before the deadline? We'll be going through all that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now, David Stearns met with the media today, and I don't think he revealed anything groundbreaking. There was some talk about Brett Beatty and his progression as a player, and David Stearns just talked about how you never know when it's going to, break through for a guy, when a guy's going to get comfortable at the big league level. He said that what we've seen over the past week, they've seen often when they go to Syracuse and watch a week of Brett Beatty playing baseball. And so it's just him finally playing up to his potential at the big league level. And that's a really good sign. But again, nothing was said there about a future role or how the Mets plan to, continue to juggle playing time for Beatty and Acuna and all these things. So again, not a lot really that we learned throughout this media session. I think the one thing was just hearing about a couple players on their way back, and Paul Blackburn is definitely a prominent one. He will make a rehab start on Friday in Binghamton, and then he will make another rehab start as the Mets want him to be fully stretched out. David Stern said that, once they bring him back, if they put him into a bullpen role, if they don't get him completely stretched out by the time that he is in that bullpen role, it'll be impossible for him to get stretched out to the proper length. So the goal is to get him stretched out fully before bringing him back as a long man potentially in the bullpen. He said that was originally the role that Blackburn was going to serve this season coming out of camp, was he was going to be a long man probably until they needed a sixth starter. So for now, they are going to continue to stretch him out because at some point in early June, they will need a spot starter in front of a Kodai Senga start. So in the meantime, they don't necessarily have to do anything to their rotation. It's fine. They have off days like the one today throughout the rest of this month, but there will be a start coming up that could be Blackburn's. Until then, I joked about him being in rehab purgatory a couple days ago, and I think that is the case. I think they will give him these 2 more rehab starts to keep stretching him out and also to keep kicking the can down the road on making a decision. If their rotation continues to perform very well, then there'll be no need for Blackburn in that rotation. And yes, eventually they might stick him in that bullpen as a long man. You never know. They might give him 2 more rehab starts and say, oh, you know what? He needs 1 more. And that might just get him to that date where he could start for the Mets as the sixth starter in the rotation. And they might roll with the six-man rotation a little bit in June. We'll see how they think it's best to sort of navigate the season when you still have the ability with off days to roll with a five-man and get one guy in your rotation and Kodai Senga that extra rest. It's just a preference on how they structure their staff. And I think the crazy thing is you look at what's coming when you look at this roster and how it's going to be different over the next month. Blackburn could come back. Frankie Montas is potentially going to be facing live hitters this week. And once he does that and checks that box off, then he should be good to go into rehab himself. And then he's going to be building up to make a return. I don't think I would completely rule out that Montas could be ready by the end of June. I think it's less likely that Sean Manaea will be. He's a little bit further behind. I think Manaea is more likely for early July than late June, but you never know. How do the Mets fit all of these guys on the roster at the same time? Obviously, injuries can happen. That can open up a door for a spot in the rotation that'll need to be filled, and that'll solve one of these issues. But even with that said, you can't carry 8 starting pitchers on a big league roster. You have flexibility with Tyler McGill and David Peterson. They both have options, but they're both throwing the ball really well. I don't think either one of them deserves to be taken off this roster. Could one of them be put in the bullpen? Conceivably, that might be the move. But then who's out of your bullpen? Your bullpen's throwing the ball well. It's a good problem to have, but if you look at where the Mets are at right now, Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, Jose Budo, those guys are all staying. Reed Garrett technically has an option, but there's no world that I could see the Mets optioning him. Huascar Braziban has been unbelievable. 25 innings pitched through a quarter of the season. He's allowed only 13 hits and 6 walks, 0.76 whip, 1.08 ERA. He has been unbelievable. You're not going to send him down. He's been too valuable to this pen. So that right there is 5 guys. Still have 3 spots in the bullpen. Could you just carry all starters? And that would mean Genesis Cabrera, Daniel Nunez, and Max Kranick are all set to be off this roster at some point. It's possible. Cabrera has thrown the ball really well so far, but it's only 5 innings. Nunez has a lot of upside, but hasn't looked great. And Kranick started the year unbelievably well, but he's given up runs on 4 of his last 5 appearances. I think right now, short term, my guess here is when Blackburn is ready to return, it'll either be Daniel Nunez or Max Kranick that gets optioned. That way you still keep Cabrera as your lefty in the bullpen if he keeps throwing the ball well. You don't have a lot of great options to replace him, and if you do decide to take Cabrera off the roster, you'd have to expose him to waivers. Another team could claim him. The other guys you have in AAA, Anthony Gasse, Felipe De La Cruz, Colin Poche, none of them really have established themselves as clear options just yet. Poche has only made a couple appearances, but he was brutal with the Nationals, and he gave up a bunch of runs in his first couple appearances in Syracuse. Gasse has been okay this year. And then Felipe De La Cruz is definitely a high upside option, but he's been a starting pitcher. He's being converted and shortened to a reliever for the first time. And so that's its own, hurdle developmentally that he still has to cross before you could consider using him. So I think Cabrera has a little bit of a safer spot on this roster, at least right now when he's throwing the ball pretty well, over a Kranick who I still think has been awesome this year and doesn't deserve to be sent down, but does have the option to be sent down and hasn't been throwing it as well lately as he did to start the season. And Nunez, I think, to me, is just the first guy probably that would get option because it hasn't looked good. Now, he has an incredible amount of upside to be a late inning reliever, but until he shows that form, to me, he's the first guy I would look at that potentially would get flipped for Blackburn. But by giving Blackburn 2 more starts, at least in this rehab process, you give Daniel Nunez, 10 days to stay in this bullpen and rack up, 4 or 5 more appearances and see what it looks like before you have to make that move. So let's just say it is Nunez down, Blackburn up, and he's in the bullpen, but he makes, a spot start and then he goes back to a long man role. When Montas is ready, if the Mets are going to a 6-man rotation, is Blackburn just still in your bullpen as a long man? Or at that point, are they shopping him? Is Blackburn on the trade market? Are they DFAing him and exposing him to waivers because he's out of options? That's going to be something that's really interesting to monitor over the next month. Maybe we'll call it 6 weeks because it's going to take some time for Montas to be back. But I am really interested to see how Blackburn fits into the picture. I really am. Now, when Manaea comes back, again, I don't know where the Mets go, but that's far enough down the road that you would think maybe something happens between now and then that might open up those doors. The one thing I will say about all of this, when you're looking at how this roster could evolve, I just don't see a spot or a pathway for your top pitching prospects like Noel McLean, Brandon Sproat, even Blade Tidwell coming back up after he's now on the 40. I don't think those guys have a clear shot at making this roster. Potentially any point this season. I mean, it's early to say that, but it's just there's so much depth that the Mets have with their rotation. There's not a lot of opportunities for runway for any of these top prospects to come in and make an impact. So then if we switch it over and we say, all right, well then how does the position player group change? Is there anyone in AAA that can come up and make an impact? There was a lot of talk about Ronnie Mauricio and David Stern's media session today. And basically what he got at is the fact that he's healthy, but he's not the player that he was just yet. The Mets have every indication, every expectation that he will get back to being the Ronnie Mauricio that he was pre-injury, but it's been a really rough process. He did not have a smooth rehab at all coming back from the torn ACL. And so now he is still trying to find himself again. And David Stearns basically said once he is up in Syracuse, he will be optioned, which is just sort of a semantics thing where right now he's on major league rehab, but he won't be brought onto the big league roster when he's fully cleared. He'll just be optioned to Syracuse, and then he'll be playing in Syracuse until he looks right, until there's a need of the roster. And I think he's down on the pecking order a little bit. Now, Drew Gilbert has played 28 games this season. You look at his numbers overall, you're like, oh man, the guy's got an 848 OPS. He's ready to come up. Well, look at the numbers a little bit closer and remember that he played 6 games in St. Lucie that are factoring into his season totals right now. In 22 games played in AAA, he's hitting 240. He's getting on base at a 379 clip, which is good, but he's only slugging at a 373 clip, 2 home runs in 22 games. He's got a 752 OPS, so I don't think Gilbert is knocking on the door yet. I think the next change to this position player group, barring injury, is Jose Siri coming back. And when he does come back, Jose Azocar should get DFA'd, and then the roster would probably stay the same. It'll be interesting to see how they juggle center field playing time at that point, but I still think the roster would remain as is until Jesse Winker comes back, and then that's when the Mets would have to make a decision on Beatty, Starling Marte at that point. Then potentially that roster spot becomes in question. Jose Siri, depending on how he's playing, like that's when the Mets will have to think hard of what they're doing with the roster. For now, I think things are pretty much going to stay the same in the coming weeks and maybe the next month. I think the roster is going to pretty much lock in and solidify with where it's been at. The only other guy to mention is Jared Young. He's got an OPS over 1,016 games in AAA, 5 home runs, 5 doubles, but the Mets have no room for him. So that's where the Mets are at right now with their roster. I think if you're looking at what will change over the next month between the end of May and even into June, it's how will Jose Siri, Paul Blackburn, and Frankie Montas factor into this mix when they're all healthy. And then in July, I would look more at Sean Manaea and Jesse Winker. Are those guys ready to return? How do they factor back into the mix? And then all of that will give you a picture of what the Mets might need at the trade deadline. But I think that's where this team is at as we look at this roster in the middle of May. To close out the show, what I want to do is break down 5 prospects whose stock is down. So we'll get to that in just a minute. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. You get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, let's talk about some prospects whose stock is down to start the season. I did the inverse of this over the weekend where I broke down 5 prospects in the Mets system whose stock is up. So now we're going to do the other side of the coin, the more unfortunate one, guys who have not gotten off to the best of starts. And we have to open it up with the guy that was the top prospect in the Mets system going into the year. That is Brandon Sproat. His stock is clearly down. Nolan McLean might have passed him as the top pitching prospect, if not the top prospect overall in this system, because McLean was unbelievable in AA, came up to AAA, has made one start, and he was outstanding. Sproat struggled in AAA last year, and I think at the time, a lot of people were able to look at that struggle and say, well, you know what? He was amazing going through high A and AA. Let's not worry about the end of a season where he threw well over 100 innings in his first professional year to have come up with these struggles. It's not something to be too concerned with. Well, now you're looking at it through 8 starts this year. He's got a 5.85 ERA and 32 and a third innings pitched, 1.33 whip. In this week, his most recent start, gave up 4 hits, walked 3, hit 3 batters, gave up 3 homers. You put it all together, gave up 6 runs and 4 and a third. It has been consistent struggles for Brandon Sproat so far this season, and it's tough to pinpoint exactly what it is. You look at the start today, I believe it was on Wednesday, but regardless, you look at the start, you hit 3 batters, you walk 3, the control is obviously concerned. I think the bigger thing, more than the walks, which the walk rate is up a little bit, I think it's more a matter of his control in zone. And when you are struggling to command in zone, you might be leaving more pitches over the heart of the plate that can be hit. And if you're trying to pitch to contact, but you're not locating your spots within the zone, you can run into trouble. I also think it's just a testament to the difficulties that pitchers are facing in AAA, where the competition is obviously better than AA. It's the next level up. But I also think it's just squaring off against more established veteran hitters, guys that have 250 big league games under their belt that come down to AAA, and they're getting a chance to hit prospects, and they just have a little bit of a mental edge on them. They're able to go through the scouting report and really know what they can do against a given prospect and have a lot of success. So I think for Sproat, it's way too early to sell your stock, to give up on him as a prospect. But it's fair to say right now, at this very moment, is Brandon Sproat as much of a clear-cut top prospect in the system as he was going into the year? Absolutely not. He has struggled, and his stock is down. When top 100 prospect updates are coming up, top 100 prospect lists, we've already seen some. His stock is literally down on those lists. He is dropping. So, and McLean, on the other hand, has seen his stock rise. So that's definitely a trend to follow as we continue throughout this season. Now, another prospect whose stock is down is Nick Morabito, which is a little bit ironic because these were the pitcher and player of the year last year, Sproat and Morabito. Now both of them have gotten off to rough starts. One caveat for Morabito and his struggles is the fact that this is his first time playing the upper levels of the minor leagues, and he's only 22 years old. But some of the things that I pointed out going to the season about what needed to happen for Morabito and why this was going to be a challenge for him, I think are coming to the surface. And the main one that I talked about, as he advances on, or as you go from low A, high A, double A, not only does the pitching get better, but the defense behind the pitching gets better. And if you have a prospect whose game is predicated on speed like Nick Morabito, you do have to wonder, as the competition is getting better, how is he going to translate? Some of those infield hits in St. Lucie aren't infield hits in AA, where you got top shortstop prospects, and you have, if it's not a top prospect playing AA, it's a veteran who's been in the minor leagues for a long time, a veteran minor leaguer, but these guys typically are going to play pretty sound defense. So I think some of those hits haven't been there. He's hitting 222, 276 on base, 368 slug. Here's the big one, 40 strikeouts and 117 at-bats. That's a brutal strikeout rate. Last year, strikeout rate was around 18, 19%. Now, skyrocketed over 30%. So he is not holding his own in these at-bats the way you'd hope he would. Coming into the year, I think what I would have said about Nick Morabito, or what I did say about Nick Morabito, is he was toggling in between whether it was going to be a guy that has a fourth outfielder outcome. I think he still has that floor pretty handedly because of his athleticism, the defense he can play in center field, the speed he brings to the base pass. I think he is your typical profile of a fourth outfielder. Question is, could he hit enough to be a regular? And right now, not really the case. It's early. It's a month. He's got a whole season in Double-A to show that he can hit at this level. But the struggles have been apparent so far. His stock is definitely down. Moving over to Brooklyn, got 3 different players here that are closing out our top 5 who had their stock down in Brooklyn. 2 of them are 20-year-old position players where you can maybe say, all right, maybe youth is the problem so far, but still stock down based on preseason expectations. Jesus Baez is hitting 211 with a 278 on base, 316 slug through 28 games this year. It's a 594 OPS. He played 6 games in St. Lucie. In 22 games played in Brooklyn, he does have 3 home runs, which is okay, about a home run a week. But Baez last year had an OPS of 782 in Port St. Lucie, hit 10 home runs in 64 games, goes up to high A, plays 8 games, has a 780 OPS in those 8 games before he tears his meniscus. Now, how much of this is due to rust off of the injury? We won't know. And I think that's what the rest of the season's about. See him continue to get playing time in Brooklyn, and hopefully the results will eventually come. But this is a guy that entered the season. Baseball America had him as the number 3 prospect in this entire system. Clearly, they were probably out a little bit too far in front on him. And I'll say for myself, I looked at Jesus Baez coming into the year as the best third base prospect in the system. I said the same thing about Jacob Reimer last season. He had a lost year due to injury. Now Reimer was featured in our prospects with stock up. He's OPSing over 1,000, potentially angling for a promotion to Double-A at some point soon. Jesus Baez has really struggled. So those 2 guys are sort of flipped. And I think now Reimer is the top third base prospect in this system. A guy that maybe is a top 10 prospect overall in the system. Baez has maybe fallen out of that top 10 with his struggles up to this point. The other, 20-year-old who is struggling in Brooklyn right now is Boston Barrow, hitting 196, 281 on base, 277 slug, 558 OPS, 1 homer in 29 games. He's even played bad defense at short, 7 errors in 16 games played there. So Boston Barrow, I had high hopes for him coming into this year. He was the star of the spring breakout game, but right now, first extended taste of high A play, it has been a struggle for Boston Barrow. We'll see how he progresses throughout the year. Last guy in our list of 5 prospects whose stock is down to start the season, Jonathan Santucci. He was the Mets' second-round pick last year, 22-year-old left-handed starting pitcher. He has an ERA of 8.14 in Brooklyn in 6 starts, given up 33 hits and 21 innings pitched, 8 walks issued, a whip of 1.95, and batters are hitting 363 against him. So brutal, really, for what he's done this season. There's a lot of guys that have had a bunch of success pitching in Brooklyn this season. Jonathan Santucci is not one of them. Maybe it's a curse of my preseason picks because I had Santucci as my pick to be the pitcher of the year in the Mets system, and I had Boston Barrow as my pick to be the player of the year. Now, these were bold predictions, so I was getting pretty spicy with them, particularly with the Barrow pick, but both of them have been pretty rough so far. Last year, I picked Sproat and Clifford, so I got 1 of 2 last year, so I don't know if I'm completely cursed, but certainly this year it seems like I jinxed those 2 guys. Maybe they will get off on a better foot as they get deeper into this season. Last 2 players to discuss is honorable mentions. These aren't stock down. These are more out of stock. Kevin Parada and Alex Ramirez continue to just completely struggle to face upper-level minor league pitching. Parada's got a 375 OPS in 25 games, hitting 122 with a 180 on base, 195 slug, only 1 home run in 25 games. Remember when we were talking about how he lost weight in spring training or going into spring training? He was in the best shape of his life and he wasn't eating ice cream anymore. And watch out for Kevin Parada. Still looks like he's not going to be a player for the Mets. And Alex Ramirez, pretty much the same deal, hitting 188, 250 on base, 235 slug, 485 OPS. He's not looking like much of a player either. So that is my list of 5 prospects whose stock is down to start the season. On tomorrow's show, we got a big series to preview, the first Subway Series of the season. Juan Soto makes his return in the Bronx. He's going to get a lot of boos from Yankees fans. It's going to be a fun series to watch. Will this be a turning point for Juan Soto where maybe he starts to take off after facing his former team? We'll be talking about all of that on tomorrow's show. If you don't want to miss it, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you're going to be Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll break down everything going on in Major League Baseball each game night. Find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel or the Locked On MLB podcast feed.